Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
Hello, and welcome to Around the Political World with John Ruffman. I am your host, John Ruffman. I'm delighted to be back from my vacation, and we have a lot to talk about. Please make sure that if you are a fan of the show, be sure to hit the follow button on the top right of Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening at this very moment. When you hit follow, leave a review or share an episode with a friend. It helps other people discover the show, keeps us going. As I like to point out each and every day, it expands our base. I must tell you, it's very tough for me to be away from this podcast for almost 3 weeks. First of all, because the world keeps turning. Second of all, because there is so much to talk about, and you have so many questions. In fact, we will add on today additional question and answers which came in while I was away. But let me start with the fact that my wife, Ellen, and I had a splendid time in Europe. We went to Barcelona, a beautiful city, wonderful opportunities to learn and explore. And then we got on a cruise, happens to be a Disney cruise, which was great fun. I love having children around and all of the giggles and fun and excitement of seeing Mickey, Minnie, and Goofy, and Pluto, and all the rest. And then after the cruise, where we saw Spain, we went to London for 5 days and had a splendid time going to theater. And I must tell you something, the highlight of my trip, of our trip to London, is always going to theater. And if you've never enjoyed live theater, well, take advantage of the opportunity, either here in San Francisco or in New York or in London. Wherever you are, live theater is just tremendous. But I want to comment on what happened while I was away. And then I will go into a question and answers session with you because we have been having a lot of questions coming in, and I'm going to try to answer a lot of those questions. Okay. First of all, let me begin by saying that Europe and the world are burning. Anybody who doubts that there is such a thing as global warming or climate change or whatever you want to call it, well, they're living in a fantasy world. And let me be clear about this directly. The Trump administration still denies that there is such a thing as global warming. There can be massive fires in Europe. There can be massive fires in the United States. And the Trump administration does not acknowledge that there is a serious problem with climate. I have chosen this morning to begin with the fact that all you have to do is go to Spain. All you have to do is, frankly, be here in Northern California. All you have to do is travel to the East Coast of the United States to see the damage being done by climate change. And what is the most remarkable thing of all is the Trump administration's complete passivity, denial that there is such a thing happening. It is perhaps the greatest crime one can imagine because it doesn't just affect us today. It will affect future generations profoundly. And so I wanted to begin this morning by telling you my deep concerns. By the way, how was the weather? When we were in Barcelona, it was very hot. As we traveled around on the cruise, it was very cool because when you're at sea, and by the way, the boat fully air conditioned, you don't really feel the heat. But in London, we felt the heat. And no doubt those of you who follow the news understand that what is happening in the world is unquestionably very disturbing. I should reflect on the fact that over the years when I've talked about climate change or global warming, particularly when I was on KGO, there were those who called and denied that such a thing was happening. They said, well, it's just normal. It's a normal process. So my answer to them is this. You may think it is a normal process, but if you live in Spain or if you live in France, or frankly, if you live on the East Coast of the United States, you know that it's not normal. It is not routine. There may be days when the temperature is higher, but never have we seen this kind of sustained impact of global warming. And if you can believe it, The Trump administration still suggests there is no such thing. I was talking to people on the cruise. I'm compulsive about that. I love talking to people. And everybody remarked how lucky we are to live in this time when, thanks to air conditioning, you can live a relatively normal life. But what's going to happen as things get progressively worse? And make no mistake, the oceans are warming. We are seeing the impact of the oceans warming every single day. And in fact, I suggested to my wife that the next cruise we take should be to Alaska before it's too late to see the glaciers. I spoke with some lovely people on the cruise who had just been to Antarctica. They had been before, and they said you can see the impact of climate change, global warming, right now if you go to Antarctica. What are we going to do as sea levels rise? What are we going to do as the temperatures get progressively hotter? Well, there is a solution, if you will, with air conditioning for humans. But what about animals who are clearly suffering? And of course, the insurance rates, and I want to be very pragmatic about this, the insurance rates are going to skyrocket, because, well, it costs a lot of money to replace things that burn down. So these are all things that we need to be concerned about. We need to think about. We need to understand that the world is changing and our lives may not be affected profoundly because of where we live. I'm very lucky I live in San Francisco, which remains an air-conditioned city. But you and I know that the world is changing in terms of climate, and we'd better understand it. And the administration, if not this administration, the next administration, and the world will have to deal with it. And certainly our children, and God willing, one day grandchildren, will have to deal with it as well. So I wanted to open with this warning. The world is aflame, and we have an administration that has turned a blind eye to the fires. It's absolutely unbelievable. And let's say a word about Donald Trump. I must tell you bluntly, I listen when I'm out of the city and out of the state and out of the country. I listen to what people say. And even those of you out there who support Donald Trump need to know the world finds it incongruous that the American people, with all of our wealth and wisdom, have fallen for Donald Trump. Everywhere I went, people said, "What in the world is going on in the United States?" It didn't matter whether I was in a swimming pool on the cruise ship, or whether I was walking in Barcelona, or whether we were in London. The question arose, how can the American people, who are so smart, have fallen for Donald Trump? But there is a question I would pose today, and that has to do with accountability. How is it possible that Donald Trump has no accountability? I came back to the news that Todd Blanche, the nominee for Attorney General, who is acting Attorney General, has now theoretically agreed to the idea that there will be no special fund, that he has theoretically conceded that there are certain issues which need to be addressed. Todd Blanche is not in charge. The person in charge is Donald Trump, and he protests. He protests that what he is doing is absolutely right, and he's going to go ahead and do it. I hope that the two senators from the Republican Party hold up Todd Blanche's nomination. I think that the promises made just yesterday are full of hot air. I felt that way months ago over the nominations for the Supreme Court, when we were told, "Don't worry, everything will be fine." There is, my friends, a clear reality. If you believe Donald Trump, well, you've taken a sucker's leap, because there's nothing to believe except when he says very clearly what he is going to do. And he is clear and precise about those objectives. We better talk foreign policy for a few minutes. I want to bring you up to date on Ukraine. The one thing I learned on this European trip with everybody I talked to is that while Ukraine is fighting back, Vladimir Putin is determined to win. And while Scud missiles or ballistic missiles or drones are flying, there is no doubt that the tension between Russia and Ukraine is growing, and there is no doubt that more people are dying. Remember when Donald Trump said, "When I'm elected president, I'll solve it within 24 hours"? There is no solution in Ukraine, and let me explain why. The Ukrainians are determined to have their independence. They do not want to be dominated by Russia, by Putin. And in turn, there is no doubt that the Russians are determined to proceed. At least Vladimir Putin wants to proceed. I sat with one gentleman who is from Eastern Europe on this trip, and he said to me, as long as Putin is the leader of Russia, this war will continue. Do you remember Donald Trump insisting he had a special relationship with Vladimir Putin and that he would solve this problem? Nonsense. And we knew it then, and we know it now. I have to say a word in terms of foreign policy about the Middle East. I suggested to you, when the so-called Memorandum of Understanding was concluded, that it was going nowhere, and that indeed there was a Munich-like atmosphere in Russia, in the United States. That is to say that no agreement that is reached with Hamas or with the Middle East leadership of Iran is going to mean a darn thing. And everybody listening to the sound of my voice should know that whatever they say about a potential deal with Hamas in Gaza, it's not going to happen. Hamas is determined to destroy Israel, and yes, to kill Jews. So I wanted to suggest this morning, in the strongest possible way, that while the price of oil may fall when there is hope that the Memorandum of Understanding may be restored, there is no way that the Memorandum of Understanding between the United States and Iran can be restored. Because Iran is not trustworthy. And by the way, neither is Donald Trump. So we are going to continue to see this kind of issue, the issue of is peace possible in the Middle East, continue to be trumpeted by the Trump administration. But we know, and it's clear, that whatever the Trump administration is suggesting is not going to work. Where does that leave us? It means there will be continued problems dealing with how to resolve the conflict in the Middle East. Let me point out, I sat with a Lebanese gentleman who happens to be Christian and who was very outspoken in his view that the Trump administration has completely missed the point. The Lebanese government does not exist. Not really. You're not dealing with a war between Israel and Lebanon. You're dealing with a war between Israel and Hamas. And that is clear when it comes to Gaza. And the same thing applies when you talk about Lebanon. It is not the Lebanese government. It is Hezbollah, which occupies and controls this conflict with Israel. The only way this can be resolved is if there is an agreement of some sort between Hezbollah and the Lebanese government and the Israelis. And as long as Hezbollah, and I'll throw Hamas in on this, as long as Hezbollah, Hamas, and Islamic Jihad remain committed to the destruction of Israel and terror against Jews, there will be no solution. Let's be clear. Benjamin Netanyahu came to see the president, and we are told it went well. I frankly doubt it. They may agree amongst themselves, but it has little impact on the reality of what's going on the ground. These matters dealing with Israel are critical. These matters dealing with Iran are critical. These matters dealing with what happens in Gaza are critical. And the simple truth is there is only one obstruction, and that is the lack of a willingness by Hezbollah, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and others to concede Israel's right to exist. There will be an election in Israel in just a few months. And I want to be clear about something. Whether you support Benjamin Netanyahu or not, and a lot of people I know do, and a lot of people I know don't, Benjamin Netanyahu is not the issue. Prime ministers come and go, and Netanyahu will not be prime minister forever. But the next prime minister of Israel will face the same problem. When you have Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah rejecting Israel's right to exist, and when Israel considers itself to be under constant attack, the only way it will be resolved is with a strong Israel. I say this because imagine for just a moment if Israel were destroyed. Imagine, what would the world reaction be? Well, among many, it would be one of a deep sense of "we told you so." Among others, it will be, well, it's all Israel's fault if they had just been willing to compromise. But the simple truth is, no matter what compromise Israel offers, the radical Muslim and Arab regimes will not accept the existence of Israel. It is an interesting commentary that Israel is not popular right now. But it's not Israel which people object to. It's Benjamin Netanyahu. And the view, an incorrect view in my judgment, that Benjamin Netanyahu is the cause of all of this misfortune. Is there no historic memory? Do you not remember previous Israeli prime ministers who have run into the same problem? So it's going to be interesting to see what the Israeli electorate does, but I will stick my neck out and I will make a prediction. No matter who is prime minister of Israel after this upcoming election, the simple reality is that Israel will not bend to its own destruction. These matters are real and genuine and of deep concern. And let's be blunt about something else. It is the President of the United States who is being listened to, whether it has to do with Ukraine or the Middle East or global warming, whatever it may be. And the simple fact is that the world understands that Donald Trump is not a reliable president of the United States. We will talk more about some of this, and particularly my late friend Stephen Hess, who wrote a wonderful book on the question of the stability of the American presidency and its impact. We'll talk about Arthur Schlesinger Jr. and his view of the imperial presidency. I try not to make these sessions tremendously academic. I try to talk in a popular parlance. But I do believe there is a simple truth, and that is that Donald Trump is a danger to America and to the world. Now, you and I know that when I was on the radio, on KGO, and even here, when Donald Trump does something right, well, I applaud it. But I learned a lesson as we were flying from Europe back to the United States. We flew over Greenland. That's right. And the pilot said, and if you all look out the window there on the right, you will see Greenland. And everyone sort of looked out the window to see it. Donald Trump still claims Greenland. He says it's going to be the 51st state. Or is it Canada that's going to be the 51st state? Or is it Venezuela that's going to be the 51st state? Do you understand that what Donald Trump is doing, what he is proposing, is a disaster? Let me continue for a few minutes before we go to question and answers on the upcoming elections here in the United States. Everywhere I went, I was asked a simple question: who will win the elections? And because I believe in the system, I believe the Democrats are going to win control of the House. It's more complicated in the Senate, but the Democrats have a chance in the Senate. And I must tell you, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, the one thing you want to stop is the power grab by Donald Trump and the fear that dominates the Republican Party. They are afraid of Donald Trump. And one can only hope that when Donald Trump is no longer an issue, that we will be able to deal with it all rationally. Now, let me address the question of J.D. Vance. During the course of my time A lot of people ask me, what kind of president will J.D. Vance become if he is elected? And I want to again be crystal clear. J.D. Vance made some comments about Watergate and Richard Nixon. He made them at the Nixon Library. All of you know that I work for Richard Nixon, that I appreciate many of the great things that Dick Nixon did for America and for the world. But when J.D. Vance, as Vice President of the United States, dismissed Watergate, saying it wouldn't even consume 12 minutes on the news today, I realized there was something fundamentally wrong with J.D. Vance. He doesn't know history. And anyone who can say that Watergate was simply a blip on the screen, well, they're wrong. This is August 2nd, or August 3rd today, to be precise. And I can tell you that when we approach August 8th and August 9th, the anniversary of Richard Nixon's resignation, there will be more opportunities for us to discuss the implications of J.D. Vance's comments. But let me make it crystal clear, or as my old boss would have said, perfectly clear. The idea that J.D. Vance would excuse what Richard Nixon did is just plain wrong. If I were in the studio on KGO, I would have played the interview that Nixon gave to David Frost, in which he conceded that he impeached himself. His resignation was as a result of the fact that what he did was clearly wrong. And I want to remind people, it was not the Watergate break-in itself which brought down Richard Nixon. What brought down Richard Nixon was the cover-up. I have one other comment to make dealing with all of this, and that has to do with the corruption in the Trump administration. Make no mistake, this is the most corrupt president in American history. A family, his family, which can make more than $1 billion, some say as much as $2 billion, some say more, during a 15-month period in this second term. It's corruption. And if this were Joe Biden, there would have been outrage by the Republicans. What is shocking to me, what is appalling to me, is the deafening silence by the Republicans about the corruption. And when we traveled in Europe, when I had the opportunity to meet with people, just chat with people, and I'm a compulsive chatter, what I discovered is that the Europeans don't understand it. How is it possible that a president's family and the president himself can make $2 billion in 15 months and it not be viewed as corruption? It is a simple reality. And it doesn't matter to me if you're a Democrat or a Republican. Do you remember the outcry during the Biden administration? The Republicans called it the crime family. Do you remember that? And all I can say is, talk about crime. Talk about making money off the presidency. What has happened with Trump, well, there's going to have to be a lot of discussion when he's gone, and maybe before, about how we make sure that this never happens again, ever. And it's something we'd better really start thinking about and talking about. And that brings me, of course, to one other point, and that has to do with the November election. I am deeply concerned about what Donald Trump is doing to try to extend his reach when it comes to November. The idea that American elections are corrupt, that they're rigged, is absolute rubbish. And the fact that Donald Trump is getting away with all of this, to me, is absolutely shocking. But we'll talk more about that as the election rolls forward. I wanted this morning to go a little longer in my general comments, just to try to bring you up to date. And I will continue to discuss these matters bluntly, frankly, and unconditionally with all of you. Now, before I go to my closing comments, I want to answer questions which have been submitted, and I will tell you some of them are quite interesting. This comes from Stephen. To me, the mess in the Middle East is because of the Jewish supremacist state of Israel. Stephen, you couldn't be more wrong. The simple truth is that Israel is a democratic state. It is not supremacist. We all understand that, who follow the Middle East carefully. There are some in this country, including the so-called democratic socialists, who, by the way, are far from the democratic socialism that I knew years ago, who were great supporters of Israel, that what you are seeing now is, without any question, Jew hatred at its height. And if you doubt it, you should have been in my shoes traveling in Europe. The idea that you would call it the Jewish supremacist state of Israel. My goodness, man, have you no idea that Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East? It's not perfect. But for those who call for the destruction of Israel, primarily because of the attitude of the Israeli government, well, what about the United States of America and its government, which has certainly created havoc in the world? The fact that you have a government which does something wrong does not mean that you deny the right of that country to exist. We learned that about Germany. We learned that about Japan. And indeed, we have seen mistakes the United States has made. But let me assure you, the greatness of the United States is clear, and we must correct these issues, just as Israel, with its internal problems, which are real and genuine, and will be discussed fully in the upcoming Israeli election in October. That's what democracy is. Now, this question comes in from Just Give Me the Truth. Accepting the little micro impressions like those through the decade have gotten us to where we are today, when the Islamists feel their power and are emboldened to put aside their differences and play games with the dumb old USA. I think of no particular reason that Trump is hip to these folks, and he's finally done something I'm hoping is not incompetence but a slow motion prosecution of war inch by inch that could very easily get out of hand. I think you're right. I think that there is no doubt that what Trump is doing could easily get out of hand. And every time he talks about a potential for a third world war, well, it's not going to be a third world war in the conventional sense, that's for sure. But is there a growing tension? You bet. This comes from, I can't read the rest of it, but I'll just give you the comment. The idea of man-made climate change is misleading. While the US and Europe are experiencing record heat, other regions, such as parts of Asia and Antarctica, are seeing unusually cold temperatures. From this perspective, there is no true global warming, only a narrative driven by fear and politics. With all due respect to this particular questioner, I disagree. All you have to do is see the fires burning to understand it. And yes, it may be colder some places, but it's a lot warmer other places. And we better take into account that global warming is a reality. This comes from Alex. What could go wrong? Trusting a convicted criminal with power. Well, if you're talking about Donald Trump, the answer is the world relies really on understanding what Donald Trump is doing and how he's doing it. And no one should doubt that Donald Trump is the person with the greatest impact in the world. Whether you like him or not, the presidency is a bully pulpit. Alex G. says, you forgot to mention the allegation of bribery and extortion and inside trading. No, I, with all due respect, I will tell you that I believe that there is a genuine issue of Donald Trump. It's not an allegation of bribery. It's not a question of extortion or insider trading. We know the Trump administration does all of those things. And therefore, we should be more alert, more involved in exposing it. I have not commented on the remarks made on 60 Minutes, but I want you all to know that there is no doubt that the impact that we are having now in terms of what's going on is clear. I'm referring now to several stories, and you'll note I'm fiddling with newspapers because I think it is very important. Did you read the comments made by CNN correspondent? Never in my career until now have I felt that these edits came from a place of misinformation. And of course, it's the comments by Ms. Vega, a Bay Area native, who is opening up about what happened at CBS News. 5 months after she was fired from 60 Minutes, she is sharing details about the troubling editorial pressure she faced after Barry Weiss was placed in charge of CBS News. I want you all to be aware of this as well. I listened carefully to BBC while I was away because it was right there for me and I was in proximity. But I can tell you without any doubt that what Donald Trump is doing to media in this country is shocking and disturbing. We have a real problem when it comes to Donald Trump and the use of media and his war against the media. And everyone must understand how dangerous this is. Well, I've covered a lot. I know that many of you have many more questions. Please submit them to us because I'm willing to try to do this as often as you want and as often as we have good questions coming in. I want to thank you for tuning in to Around the Political World with John Rothman. I want to thank you for your indulgence in my taking a vacation for almost 3 weeks. I know that I missed having an opportunity to express my views, and I hope you missed me as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts on today's episode. You can write a review on Apple Podcasts, drop a comment on YouTube or Spotify, click any of the links in the show notes to connect with me on social media. Please remember to share this episode with a friend or colleague so we can continue to grow and expand. And I want to thank especially all of you because this show has been getting so much positive attention and wonderful advertising support. We'll be announcing any day now a new advertiser, and we're just delighted to have them on board as well. You understand that these advertisements help us to create more opportunities for Around the Political World with John Rothman, and we're happy to share some of that with you. I want to say a special thank you to Gogo Zoger, the wonderful producer of Around the Political World with John Rothman. Gogo had a little bit of a vacation, at least in terms of this program, but we're back, we're up and running, and we will be here every single day. All right, that's it for today. I am going to, of course, continue to follow the news, continue to talk with you, and I appreciate your indulgence, and I want you to know how much I appreciate being back. I am John Rothman. You are listening to Around the Political World with John Rothman, and I will be back, I'm delighted to say, tomorrow.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.